If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, this story is for you. Leave a comment below if you've ever felt invisible among the people who were supposed to love you most. As for me, I wasn't just invisible. I was pushed into the water. I still vividly remember the moment my father's hand landed on my shoulder. Not a gentle pat of encouragement, but a cold, deliberate shove without a word of warning. 1 second later, my world turned upside down, my evening gown sweeping through the air, and my entire body plunged into the central fountain at the Fairfield Court Hotel, the venue for my sister's wedding. Water splashed everywhere. Gasps filled the air. Then, laughter. Clapping, mixed with a few whistles. Someone I don't know who shouted in excitement, "The wet t-shirt contest has begun." I sat in the fountain, hair-dripping dress clinging to my skin. Everything was soaked, including the last shred of dignity I'd tried to hold on to for over 30 years in the Whitmore family. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood up, straightened my posture, and stepped out of the water as if reborn. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 33 years old. And that was the day I officially let go of the illusion that I'd ever be loved by my blood relatives. Harper's wedding, my younger sister's, was held at the Fairfield Court, a renowned 5-star hotel in Greenwich, Connecticut. The venue was known for its gold-plated ballrooms, Italian-style hanging gardens, and of course the magnificent central fountain in the courtyard. Harper was always my parents' pride and joy. Born 4 years after me, she embodied everything my family valued: beauty, charisma, charm, and the ability to make people adore her at first glance. While I studied criminal law and later joined the FBI, Harper pursued interior design and posted artsy photos on Instagram. Yet I was the one constantly asked, "When are you going to do something to make your parents proud?" I attended the wedding alone. Daniel, my husband, yes, I'm married, was in Tokyo on business and couldn't make it back in time. Naturally, no one in my family knew I was married. We kept it secret for safety reasons, and honestly, I didn't want Daniel to become a topic of gossip at their cocktail parties. I walked into the wedding reception in an emerald green gown, wearing elegant diamond earrings Daniel had given me for our first anniversary, carrying myself with what I thought was enough poise to shield my self-respect. I was wrong. I was seated at table 19, far from the center, far from the stage, far from my family. "Oh, Claire didn't expect you to show up," Harper said with a smile as she glided past me at the cocktail hour. "We thought you'd be busy with secret government stuff." "My job still allows me to raise a glass to celebrate you," I replied, keeping my tone light. She didn't need to know I'd just wrapped up a 3-state counterintelligence operation. A relative, I can't recall their name, sidled up. "Claire, still not married. Your parents must be so worried. Harper found the perfect son-in-law, didn't she?" I just smiled. Some things weren't worth correcting. The reception unfolded like a play in which I'd never been cast a leading role. Family photos were taken without anyone calling my name. Harper was introduced as the Whitmore family's greatest pride, and me, I was the silent shadow slipping out of every photo session. I was about to leave early when my father stood up with a glass of wine and began his speech. "Today is the happiest day of my life, when my little girl Harper marries the man this family has always dreamed of." I sat quietly, my smile frozen, my hand clenched into a fist. He continued, "Harper is our greatest pride. She has never let us down. Unlike certain others." I stood up, not out of anger, but because I had nothing left to hold on to. I walked toward the terrace to get some air, but he saw me. Claire running away again. I stopped, just stepping outside for a bit. "You never face things, never put family first. That's why you're alone at 33. I turned back, not arguing, just silent. Then he approached. In that moment, I hoped, just once, he'd let me go without seeing me as a burden. But no. The push came swiftly, decisively. I couldn't react in time. The cold water hit me like a wake-up slap. I sat motionless in the water. Then I stood stepping out of the fountain, like someone rising from their own ashes. I looked straight at my father, at my mother, at Harper. No one came near. No one offered a hand. And I didn't need them to. Standing under the stunned gazes of over 200 guests, water dripping down my face and neck, I said, "Remember this moment." I turned, leaving behind a puddle and bewildered stares. Have you ever had a moment where you stood up not for others but for your own dignity? If so, I want to read your story in the comments below. Trust me, we're not alone. If you grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than feelings, where every compliment went to someone else and every mistake was yours, we have something in common. Share a childhood memory that made you feel like an outsider, and I'll read it and empathize with you. After Harper's wedding, after the fall into the fountain, and my words, remember this moment, I went home, peeled off the cold, wet fabric, and faced a memory even colder, my childhood in the Whitmore family. The house I grew up in sat on a tree-lined street in Old Greenwich. Its pristine white exterior, arched windows, and gray stone steps were always spotless, as if no one ever entered with shoes on. Everything was perfect from the outside. Inside was a different world. Not loud, not violent, but cold. Everything in the house had rules, from how to use cutlery to how to speak to the gardener. But one thing was never allowed: being yourself. I was born 4 years before Harper. When I came into the world, my father had just been appointed general counsel for a major New York real estate conglomerate. My mother, a former Miss Connecticut 1982, had transitioned from the spotlight to high society charity teas and galas. I was their firstborn, meant to be the center of attention. But everything changed when Harper arrived. Harper was born with my father's blue eyes, golden hair, like morning sunlight, and a smile that melted everyone. I had dark brown hair and the somber eyes of my grandmother, whom my mother never spoke of fondly. From an early age I realized I was the rough draft. Whenever Harper appeared, I faded. All the praise, all the attention went to her. Harper's so adorable. She's a natural dancer. She's the spitting image of her mother. And me, Claire, sit up straighter. Don't cut your hair like that. It doesn't suit your round face. You show too much gum when you smile, so don't laugh so loud. I excelled in school. Top of my class from 1st to 12th grade, debate team, school newspaper, full scholarship to Boston University. But all of that was just an echo in a house too loud with Harper's radiant presence. I still remember my 10th birthday. I woke up early, put on the purple floral dress my mother had sewn the year before, waiting for the cake like every year. But that morning, there were no balloons, no cake, no wishes. My mother was busy preparing for Harper's audition for an international ballet class. I stood by the window, clutching an old stuffed bear. That evening, my father looked at me and said, "You know the family's busy. Don't ask for too much." I didn't cry. I learned not to cry early on. But I remembered. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, I spent days preparing my speech. I wanted to prove to my family I was worthy. I stepped onto the stage, began my opening lines, and then my father called out from the audience, "Claire's always been great at memorizing. She's had a whole library in her head since she was little." The auditorium laughed. Not for me, but for him. I stood silent, then continued as if I hadn't heard. But every word after that felt like a desperate effort not to shatter. Have you ever had to try twice, 3 times as hard, just to be recognized for half as much? If so, I invite you to share. No names needed, just breathing it out is a journey. Harper wasn't bad. She was just used to being loved. When I got into the FBI, she entered a televised interior design competition. I passed. She didn't. But the local papers only wrote about Harper, the creative young woman who didn't win but shone anyway. For years I thought if I tried harder, persisted longer, I'd be seen. But in the Whitmore house, no one saw the unremarkable. I was a nightlight among crystal chandeliers. I'm not saying this to complain. Just to let you know, when my father pushed me into the fountain at Harper's wedding, it wasn't the first time I'd been submerged. It was just the first time anyone witnessed it. Behind the pristine white doors of the Whitmore mansion was an emotional prison where standards were brick walls, expectations were bars, and silence was the sentence. I don't know what environment you grew up in, but if you've ever felt you didn't belong, even at your own family's dinner table, you understand me. And if you've never told anyone, let this be the first place. I read every comment because each shared line is a step closer to inner freedom. I'm not writing this chapter to complain. I'm writing to record. To document what was overlooked, dismissed, ignored for 30 years. Because memories, when spoken, have the power to heal. And I'm learning how to heal myself. There's a kind of growth that comes without applause, without spotlights, without congratulations. It's quiet, resilient, enduring. If you've ever had to find your own way, with no one to guide or wait for you, tell me. Your comment might be the first affirmation that you deserve to be recognized. I left the Whitmore house at 18 without looking back. Boston welcomed me with cold winds, red brick buildings, and relentless honking horns. I rented a small room on the 3rd floor of an old house near the university's shared bathroom walls, so thin I could hear my neighbors' sighs, but it was the first space I called my own. I studied criminal law at Boston University. Not because I wanted to be a lawyer, but because I wanted to understand the system that judged, controlled, and overlooked people like me. Classes were crowded, professors strict, and every paper demanded not just arguments, but a compelling voice, something I'd been told I lacked. I had no one behind me, no private tutors, no recommendation letters from senator uncles, but I had something many classmates didn't, a burning need to prove my worth, even if no one at home was waiting for the news. 4 years 4.0 GPA, working at the university library, writing for the student journal. I had no time for parties, but I learned to brew the perfect coffee to stay awake through the night. One day after a presentation on federal criminal policy, my professor approached me and said, "Have you ever considered applying to the FBI?" I laughed. Me. Not because of some stereotype, he said, but because you don't give up. Even under scrutiny, you hold your structure. That's rare grit. For the first time, someone outside my family looked at me and saw not flaws, but potential. I went back to my room and opened the FBI's recruitment website. The process was a maze: physical, psychological knowledge, and background checks. I wasn't sure I'd pass, but I applied. Because if I didn't believe in myself, who would? The day I received the preliminary acceptance letter to the FBI Academy in Quantico, I stood in the library for nearly 15 minutes, tears falling onto the envelope. Not out of joy, but because I had no one to call, no one to share this with. The FBI Academy wasn't like the movies. No cool spies in black suits striding through classrooms. Just sweat pressure and competition down to every step of a run. I wasn't the fittest in my class. Early on, I couldn't complete the 2-mile run in the required time. There were moments I wanted to quit, but I remembered my father's look when he interrupted my high school graduation speech, and I kept running. After 6 months of training, I graduated in the top 10% of my class. I chose counterintelligence analysis, a field requiring a sharp mind, the ability to read between the lines, and a honed, not innate intuition. My first year, I was the rookie making coffee, compiling reports, but I didn't complain. I learned to read facial expressions during interrogations, trace information from a few encrypted emails, and keep secrets not just from the world, but from those I called family. My parents knew I worked for the government but never asked for details. Once during a rare Thanksgiving dinner I was invited to, my mother said, "Claire does some administrative work in Washington." "Right, Harper." Harper laughed. "She's always so mysterious. Like she's a spy or something." I just sipped my wine. Sometimes I wanted to say, "Mom, I just got level 5 clearance to national defense systems," but I swallowed it, because I knew in their eyes I'd always be the one who did everything right, but was never special enough to be named. If you're in a silent struggle, unnoticed, unacknowledged, I understand you. Comment a single yes if you want. Let me know you're still here, still trying. And I'll be here reading every line. I worked at 3 different FBI branches over 4 years. Each transfer meant leaving a small apartment, a few friends, old memories, and starting over. But I didn't feel adrift. Each step was a brick in rebuilding the self I chose, not Harper's shadow. At 27, I was promoted to lead analyst, 3 years ahead of average, then deputy chief, then commander of a special counterintelligence task force at 29. I dismantled 2 international tech espionage networks from a single leaked email. I didn't make the news or TV, but I was given a folded flag, a symbol of a successful operation. And even though no one at home called to congratulate me, I began to realize I no longer needed them to. Because I had grown without anyone's validation, I had grown. Have you ever met someone who didn't ask what you've accomplished, but instead, "Are you tired?" Someone who didn't want to fix you, just understand you. If you have, you're lucky. If not, maybe this chapter will give you some hope. Share, has anyone like that been in your life? Just one line. I met Daniel Carter in the fall of my 30th year at a cybersecurity conference in D.C. I was representing the FBI, presenting on strategies to counter targeted insider cyber attacks, a dry technical topic. He was the keynote speaker, founder of Carter Cybertech, a global cybersecurity giant. I knew nothing about him beforehand, only that this tall man with dark hair and sharp eyes took the stage with a presence unlike any tech CEO I'd met. No flash, no gimmicks. When he said security starts not with software, but with trust, the room fell unusually silent. After the conference, we ended up at a closed networking event. I was standing by the bar with a glass of water, old habit, when he approached. "Claire Whitmore, your presentation was razor sharp." I turned, nodded politely. "Thanks. I didn't think a CEO like you would listen to the technical stuff." He smiled, not meeting my eyes. I listened because of the speaker. I don't believe in love at first sight, but I believe in feeling safe. And with Daniel, I felt it instantly a calm amidst my chaotic life. We started texting, then coffee, then long walks along the Potomac as the city lit up. He didn't ask about my family, didn't pry into the job I couldn't fully share. He only cared about what I was ready to say. Once I accidentally mentioned my forgotten childhood, the interrupted graduation speech. He didn't interrupt, didn't console. He just quietly held my hand, letting me know I wasn't alone in that memory. Daniel was the kind of person who entered a room without introduction, yet everyone noticed. But what struck me wasn't his presence. It was how he stepped back to let others shine. In meetings, he let engineers present. At dinners, he asked about the waiter's dreams. He had everything power, wealth, fame, but let none of it define him. When I asked why he cared about me, someone without fame, inheritance, or a grand family name, he said, "Because you're the only one not trying to impress. And you don't need to." We dated secretly for 14 months. I kept it from colleagues. He kept it from the media. Partly for security, both of us were easy targets if exposed, but mostly because I wasn't ready to bring him home. I didn't want him dissected at the Whitmore dinner table weighed for worthiness. I didn't want my family judging Daniel by his wallet, or making him see me as someone with unhealed wounds. The truth was, I was healing because of him. When he proposed, there were no cameras, no rose petals. Just an evening on his Georgetown apartment balcony in the cold winter, with the city glowing gold. He held my hand, offering a simple ring. No diamond, just engraved with 2 words, "Trust you." I don't need a big wedding, no magazine photos. I just need you to say yes. And keep this ours if you want. I nodded in silence. Like every major choice in my life, no grand words, just the right person. We married at a small city hall with 2 witnesses, Marcus, my closest colleague, and Eliza, Daniel's sister. Afterward, we had lunch at a modest Italian restaurant, where the waiter had no idea he was serving one of America's richest men and a senior FBI agent. You might ask, was it sad? No parents, no white dress, no wedding march. Honestly, no, because it was the first time I chose something just for me not to please anyone else. We lived 3 years in peace. Outside, I was the stern, secretive FBI Deputy Director of Counterintelligence. Daniel was the billionaire founder on finance magazine covers. But behind our apartment door, I could laugh loudly, walk barefoot, and say things only he understood. My family knew nothing. They never asked. My mother occasionally texted Claire, "Anyone joining you at Harper's wedding? If not, I can arrange." I'd reply, "Thanks, Mom. I'm fine going alone." I know some need to publicize love as protection. For me, keeping it private was the best shield. Not out of fear of loss, but because I wasn't ready for the most beautiful part of my life to be judged by those who never truly listened. Have you ever kept something precious to yourself, afraid the world would ruin it? If so, I hope you know you're not selfish. You're just learning to protect what keeps you believing in life. Some places you leave because there's nothing left to hold on to, but when you return wounds you thought had healed start to bleed again. If you've ever gone home feeling like an uninvited guest, leave a dot in the comments. It's a small gesture, but to me it's profound empathy. The wedding invitation arrived on a rainy spring afternoon. A pearl-colored envelope, gold-embossed lettering, Harper Whitmore and Jonathan Adler cordially invite. No dear sister. Just my name, Claire Whitmore, printed coldly like an old colleague rather than someone who grew up in the same house. I set the invitation on the kitchen table, where the dim light cast a strange glow on the luxurious paper. Daniel just finished brewing tea, handed me a cup, and sat across from me quietly. He didn't ask right away. We'd been together long enough for him to know sometimes silence is all that's needed. "Are you going?" he asked eventually. I stared at the tea wisps of steam rising like an elusive call from the past. "I don't know. I don't think they really want me there." Daniel nodded slightly. "What do you want?" That question, simple, clear, stunned me. When had I stopped asking myself that? When had I only reacted, endured, and silently moved on? In the end, I decided to go. Not because they expected me, but because I needed to face it. Like touching an old scar to confirm it no longer hurts enough to bring you to your knees. Daniel had a meeting in Tokyo that week. "I can reschedule?" he said. "Just say you need me there." I shook my head. "Go. They don't know about you, and I'm not ready for them to. This is something I need to do alone." I arrived at the Fairmont Hotel at noon on the wedding day. I wore a high-neck sapphire gown, simple but elegant. Hair neatly pinned. Pearl earrings, a birthday gift from Daniel the previous year. I was on time as the invitation stated. Harper's wedding was a visual symphony. White flowers draped from the ceiling to every candelabra. Silk ribbons with the bride and groom's names adorned each table. And, of course, the seating chart. I approached it. Table 19. I glanced quickly, my parents, Harper and Jonathan, close friends, immediate family, all at the central table. Me, at a table with strangers, distant aunts, and a man who asked if I was an event staff member. I wasn't surprised, but that didn't make it hurt less. I sat down, nodded to those around me, poured a glass of water, and observed. Harper entered with Jonathan to soft music. She looked radiant, undeniably so. But amidst the glow of her wedding dress and the roaring applause, one thing was clear: I didn't exist there. When family photos began, I stepped forward, but the photographer asked, "Sorry, are you with the bride's or groom's side?" I smiled bitterly. "I'm the bride's sister." He flinched. "Oh, sorry. You're not on the list." "It's fine," I said, stepping back. I didn't join any photos. And maybe that was planned from the start. A relative, Aunt Vivian, my mother's cousin, whispered as I returned to my table, "Claire, such a shame to see you. Still alone. Your mother's so worried. It gets harder to find someone decent as you age." I sipped my water, keeping a calm smile. I didn't bother saying my husband was signing a multi-million-dollar cybersecurity deal in Tokyo. I was done offering proof. Proof was once my language to beg for recognition. Now I chose silence. The reception was like every Whitmore event, lavish, orchestrated, slightly stifling. I didn't know anyone around me. They talked about yachts, Tuscan resorts, how Harper was everyone's darling since childhood. No one asked how I was. No one knew I'd thwarted 2 cyber espionage attacks in a year. Have you ever been in a crowded room and felt like a decorative object? If so, you might understand why I started feeling tired, a deeper exhaustion than physical. As if I was using all my energy just to not vanish completely from my own sight. I stood up, walked to the balcony to breathe. The evening breeze lifted my dress slightly. I touched my phone. A text from Daniel landed. "Almost done." "You okay?" I didn't reply. I didn't want to lie, nor was I ready to tell the truth. I just looked at the sky, turning to dusk. Its color matched my dress. And my mood, a quiet kind of radiance unnoticed. I thought after all these years of striving I'd be immune, that I'd built armor thick enough to protect my soft core. But sometimes it's the silent things not being seen, not named, not given a place, that cut deeper than any knife. And I began to realize not every pain needs a reaction. Some pains just need to be witnessed. And that in itself is enough. I thought I was used to being ignored, to my invisibility. But no one is truly ready to be made a laughingstock in front of hundreds by their own father. That evening, the Grandfield Hotel's ballroom in Connecticut sparkled like a dream by my family's standards. Crystal chandeliers, white roses hanging from the ceiling, soft orchestral music weaving through clinking glasses. Harper appeared like a Disney princess stepping off the screen in a Vera Wang gown, light tracing her path. I stood quietly in a corner unnoticed. When my father stood tapping his wineglass with a silver spoon, his voice carrying the weight of a renowned lawyer, I didn't expect to be mentioned. But I didn't expect to be ridiculed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today is the day a father could be proudest. My daughter Harper, from day one, has been a symbol of achievement, devotion, beauty, and character." Applause. I stayed silent. "Harper," he turned to my sister, "you've never let us down. From your gold medal in ballet at 8 to a full scholarship at Yale, and now a new family with the most worthy man." Louder applause. All eyes turned to the main table. And then to me. And then, "There are others in the family," he said, his tone heavier, "who choose a different path. A confusing one. Quiet. Unclear. No one by their side, no mark left." "Claire." I looked up. His eyes locked onto mine. "Continues to worry us. No one knows what she's really doing. Calls herself busy with the government, but nothing concrete. No family, no clear future." Murmurs began. My face burned. My heart pounded in my ears. 32 this year, he continued, and still alone. Of course not everyone can achieve what Harper has. I stood. Not to flee, but to step out of that mocking spotlight. But he wasn't done. "Claire," he called louder, "where are you going?" Retreating again, as always. Laughter erupted. I stopped. Everyone was watching. Part of me wanted to disappear. But another part, newer, stronger, held me there. "Don't do this," I said softly but clearly. "Do what tell the truth." He stepped closer. You have nothing to hide. Or do you? And then, before the entire room, he placed his hand on my shoulder and pushed. I stumbled and fell into the central fountain. Cold water hit my face hair, my expensive olive velvet gown now clinging like a rag. Sounds muffled underwater. When I looked up, laughter exploded. Someone whistled. Someone raised their phone to snap a photo. Clapping, jokes, glee, and my father's face no remorse. Just triumph. I stood. No tears, no screams. Just stood. Hair dripping. Dress heavy. Mascara smeared. But I stood tall. Remember this moment. I spoke loudly, clearly, calmly. The room fell silent. All eyes on me, not as a joke, but as if they didn't know how to see me anymore. Remember exactly how you treated me. I continued, eyes fixed on my father. Remember your choice. Because I will. I stepped out of the fountain. Cold. But my head was burning. And for the first time I didn't feel ashamed of being me. I felt clear, strong, and dangerous in a new way. If you've ever been humiliated by family or anyone in front of others but still stood up, leave a comment. Your story might give strength to someone reading this. I didn't know then, after that fall, what awaited me outside. I only knew a new version of me had been awakened. And just minutes later, that door would open in a way no one in that room could have imagined. I never believed in perfection crafted from lights and flowers. But that night, as I stepped out of the restroom with damp hair and slightly unsteady steps from the fountain fall, I knew a different truth was about to begin. And when the grand ballroom doors swung open, I didn't need to turn to know Daniel had arrived. The silence lasted only seconds, but it seemed to freeze the entire space. Music stopped. Laughter fizzled out of place. And then his footsteps slow, certain. No one dared stop him. Daniel Carter, CEO of Carter Tech, a cybersecurity empire. The man I loved, chose, and married in secret 3 years ago, not out of shame, but to keep one part of my life unscrutinized. He wore a tailored black suit, calm, as if accustomed to high-stakes summits, where every gesture was watched. He walked straight to me, his deep green eyes finding me in the crowd, and when he saw me standing firm barefoot on the marble floor, he gave a faint smile. One look, and I knew I was no longer alone. No. Behind him, 4 security personnel in dark suits, earpieces in place. They didn't need to explain their presence. When a billionaire CEO shows up uninvited, everyone knows it's not by chance. I felt the shocked, curious, and fearful stares from the tables. My mother stood frozen by the buffet, her champagne glass nearly slipping. My father, who'd pushed me into the water less than an hour ago, tried to stand taller. His face flushed. Harper froze mid-dance, her wedding gown swaying in the cold draft from the closing doors. Daniel stopped before me. "You okay?" he asked softly, just for me. I nodded slightly. "Better now that you're here." He turned, his voice clear. "I'm Daniel Carter, Claire's husband." A silent explosion rippled through the room. People glanced at each other. Some reached for their phones. Daniel continued, eyes not leaving my father. "And if anyone's wondering, yes, my wife is the Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. I said nothing, just stood beside him. I didn't need to speak. He'd said what mattered. Each word was a hammer strike against the fragile stone of past criticisms. The ballroom hushed. Then murmurs began. A guest whispered urgently to their neighbor. A faint gasp from my mother. Harper stepped back half a step as if slapped. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile in triumph. I just calmly looked at each familiar face, each pair of eyes that once made me feel small. And I said, "Now you know." I turned to Daniel. He nodded slightly. One of his security team quietly draped a coat over my shoulders. No one spoke as he led me down the central aisle, past lavish tables, past stunned gazes. I heard only my heels on the floor and the steady beat of my heart. But before we reached the door, a voice called out, "Claire, wait." I turned. It was my mother. Her face still proud, but her eyes slightly blurred as if trying to say something. But I didn't stop. Not because I was angry, but because I'd moved beyond anger long ago. Stepping outside, I felt the cold, clear light of the Connecticut night wash over my face. No stars above, but I didn't need more light. Daniel squeezed my hand. "Ready to end this day?" I smiled. "Ready to start tomorrow." But I didn't expect tomorrow to begin with an anonymous letter. A week after the wedding, on a quiet Saturday morning in the penthouse apartment Daniel and I shared in Boston, I received an unmarked envelope. No logo. No postmark. Just cream-colored paper pale blue ink and Claire written carefully, slightly trembling. I didn't need a signature to know who sent it. I thought I'd tremble or feel nervous holding that letter. But no, the only feeling was stillness. Like a lake after a storm, not quite peaceful, but no longer raging. I opened it. Claire. I don't know where to begin. What I did at Harper's wedding is something I can't justify. Every time I recall your eyes, not accusing, not pleading, just distant, I feel shame and pain. I know I've never been a good father. With Harper, it was easy. With you, I didn't understand you, and instead of trying, I judged. For so many years. It may be too late for forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Not just for that night, but for all 33 years. No signature, no promises, no begging. Just a confession, silent, clumsy, but sincere. I folded the letter, not because I didn't want to read on, but because I'd understood enough. Have you ever received an apology? Not in words. An apology, not for forgiveness, but to acknowledge the pain caused. If so, share with me in the comments. Maybe your story is a key to someone's healing. I didn't call him, didn't text, didn't reply. I just placed the letter in the top drawer of my desk, where I keep the most important things. A childhood photo of me hugging my mother, my first FBI badge, and the ring my mother gave me when I was 12, the only time she did something just for me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry anymore. Not because the letter erased the hurt, but because with it, I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. I'd survived. I'd succeeded. I'd loved and been loved. Now I just needed to live for myself. Daniel noticed the change before I did. As I sat by the window reading the letter, he didn't ask. He just poured more tea and placed a hand on my shoulder. His silence was a safe space, requiring no explanation. From him, he asked later after I'd put the letter away. I nodded. I won't push you to forgive, but if you do, I'll be with you through it. I smiled. I don't know if I can forgive, but I know I'm not resentful anymore. I just want clarity between them and me about who we are. That afternoon, I walked alone to Boston Common. The fall air was crisp sunlight slanting like a thin blanket over the city. I sat on a familiar wooden bench watching kids play by the fountain. Another fountain, but no mocking laughter, no soaked dress, no scornful looks from the man who called me daughter. Just the sound of water rustling leaves, and my heart quietly opening a door. That night I asked myself if he hadn't sent the letter, could I have moved on maybe? But with it, I moved on lighter. And if one day we sit down to talk, it will start here. Not because he's changed, not because I've forgotten what happened, but because I don't want to cage myself in the past anymore. Fie. A week later, on my 33rd birthday, I received another surprise. Not in an envelope, but in flesh and blood. When I opened the living room door, expecting a quiet evening with Daniel, I saw my parents, Harper, and a group of relatives standing there with balloons, a cake, and a large card reading Claire, "Happy first real birthday." No one said much. No speeches, no apologies or lessons learned. Just my mother awkwardly placing a hand on my shoulder saying, "I hope this time I didn't forget." I stood still, no tears, no forced smile. I just nodded and let it happen. They cut the cake. They sang the song I'd only ever heard for Harper over 30 years. They let me sit at the center of the table, not Harper, not my father, but me. It wasn't perfect redemption, but it was a beginning. I once thought I'd never belong here. But sometimes belonging isn't about being fully accepted. It's about being seen as yourself. And I think for the first time, they began to see me. As the evening ended, my father left early. But before going, he paused at the door looking at me as if about to say something. Then he just nodded slightly. I nodded back. No words needed. It was the first time we understood each other, not because someone won or lost. If you've ever held a letter unanswered, or chosen to forgive without forgetting, I want to hear your story. Comment below. You might find someone like you in those shared lines. That night in Daniel's arms, I realized forgiveness isn't a gift you give others. It's a door you open, to step out of your own darkness. And tomorrow I'd walk on unburdened, no longer needing acceptance, just needing to be me. Because ahead, a new chapter awaited. I once thought some things would never change. That you could grow, succeed, surpass old expectations, but still be framed in your family's eyes as the lesser child, the shadow no one truly cared about. I'd learned to live with it, even accept it as part of the Whitmore family structure. So that night when Daniel said it'd just be a small dinner at the Italian restaurant near our house, I didn't suspect a thing. He was always thoughtful, knowing I disliked fanfare, especially after the chaotic weeks post Harper's wedding. I even joked he didn't need candles or cake, just him was enough. We ate early. On the way home, I was surprised when Daniel slowed the car before our gate. "You sure you locked the door when we left?" he asked, voice calm, but with a hint of something else. I frowned. "Pretty sure." "Why?" He smiled. Then someone must have broken in to set this up. Before I could ask, the door opened. Inside, lights blazed, and dozens of familiar faces waited, my parents, Harper and Thomas, a few close relatives. No garish balloons, no flashy banners, just a long table, a few wine glasses, a small cake, and gentle applause. "Happy birthday, Claire." I froze at the threshold. No one rushed to hug me, no one teared up like in American family movies. But I saw something else eyes. Awkward, hesitant, and something truer. Maybe remorse, maybe effort. My mother approached first. She said simply, "The cake's mocha, your favorite." I remembered. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded slightly. My whole life I'd longed to be remembered correctly, not for my flaws or mistakes. And now, clumsy and late, they were trying. I accepted each wish, each glance. There was a feeling I'd never named when you don't need to stand out or succeed spectacularly to be seen. They were here for me. Not for my FBI title. Not for my billionaire husband. But to try stepping into my real life as me. Harper stood a bit away, eyes uneasy. When I approached, she held her wine glass and said, "You know, I've never thrown a birthday for anyone but myself." I gave a small laugh. "Now you have." A pause. Then Harper tilted her head, slightly bowing. "Sorry, sis. For not asking. For never thinking you needed to be chosen." I said nothing. I didn't need to. Some things words only weigh down. Sometimes change doesn't need drama. Just a dinner. A look without scrutiny. A small cake with candles lit for no one but me. Daniel stood back quietly, watching me move through the room, once a symbol of distance now slowly becoming closer. He didn't need to step in, didn't need to shine. He knew this moment was mine. After dinner, as everyone left, I sat alone in the kitchen. The tablecloth still had red wine stains, half-eaten dessert plates scattered. I looked around the room, still the same house, but the air was different. I didn't know how long it would last, if the old indifference would return, but I knew today they chose me. I opened my phone to a text from Emma, my cousin from Thomas's side, the only one kind to me at Harper's wedding. Short and sweet. Happy birthday. You deserved that whole room and more. I replied, today I believed that for the first time. Have you ever felt you had to be brilliant, successful, perfect, just to be accepted by those who should love you unconditionally? If you're like me, share your story. You might not be as alone as you think. I turned off the light, went upstairs feeling light. Tomorrow I'd join Daniel for another dinner this time, an official invitation from my parents. They said they wanted to hear about your work for real. I didn't expect miracles. But I'd go for me to lay the past down gently. I'm not sure what made me step onto the rooftop that late night. Maybe the birthday party's afterglow urging me to breathe some air. Maybe it was seeing my mother leave the dining room, quietly. Wine glass half held, her usual proud gait softened. Whatever it was, I left the cozy kitchen, walked down the long hallway, and opened the door to the roof where I used to escape family gatherings as a child to read alone. My mother was already there. She stood with her back to me, hands cradling her wine glass, as if holding on to the last warmth of the evening. The city below sparkled. New Haven in fall had never looked so beautiful, but I only saw her back straight, but no longer rigid. Something in her stance made me quietly close the door and not speak right away. After a moment she turned. No surprise, no defensiveness. "You still love this place, don't you?" she said softly. "When you were mad at me as a kid, you'd always hide up here." I smiled, not denying it, because it was quiet. No one told me to be gentler, speak softer, or be more like Harper. She nodded. No rebuttal, just a thoughtful nod. I didn't expect a conversation. But then she spoke. "Claire, will you come back?" I looked at her. The autumn breeze lifted her hair gently. For the first time in years, I saw her without heavy makeup, Without glamour, just my mother, the woman who raised me in her way. And now asking a question not just about dinner, but about our future. I'm not sure I answered honestly. Things have changed. I have changed. I know. A pause. Then I said calmly, without bitterness or hurt, I can't come back just to play the quiet daughter again, showing up on cue, smiling the right way, avoiding anything that makes people uncomfortable. She lowered her head. I continued, knowing if I didn't speak now, I might never. I don't want to be accepted as a more successful, prestigious version of Harper. I want to be accepted as me, flaws, edges, choices, and all. She stayed silent for a long time. Then she set her wine glass on the railing, turned fully to me and said, I spent years trying to mold you into what I thought was best for you. But maybe I'm the one who needs to change. I didn't react, didn't trust immediately. But I listened. My girl, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know how to apologize properly. But I'm starting to realize it's not that I didn't love you, but that I didn't know how to show it beyond control. Harper was easier. She's like me. You're not. And instead of learning to love differently, I tried to shape you. That was my mistake. The rooftop breeze seemed to pause in that moment. I don't expect you to forget, or forgive right away. But I want you to know I'm ready to listen if you have more to say. I looked into her eyes. No avoidance. No hiding emotions anymore. Then listen to this, I said slowly. I'm still hurt. But I don't want to carry those wounds forever. If there's a chance to rebuild, it has to start with honesty. No comparisons, no manipulation. Just seeing each other as people. She nodded slowly this time. She reached out, not forcing, just a slight gesture like an invitation for a hug. I stepped forward, and in the most unexpected moment, I rested my head on her shoulder. No tears. Just breathing. As if for the first time, I let myself lean on the mother I'd kept at a distance for so long. If you've had a moment like that where the one who hurt you was the first to offer healing, share it with me. Someone might need to know they're not alone. That night, as I left the rooftop, Daniel was waiting downstairs, a hot tea in hand, his eyes asking nothing, just enough to let me know he understood. And I said softly, maybe we'll come back. But as a new version, not the old one. He smiled. I don't know what the future holds. But for the first time I felt I get to choose how it begins. Strangely, once the hurts were named, things started moving. Not dazzling changes, no cinematic apologies. Just small, thread-like signs, real enough to make me believe something was truly shifting. The first dinner happened on a Friday evening, 2 weeks after the surprise birthday. The invitation came via a brief text from my mother, Friday 7 p.m. We hope you'll come. I stared at the message for 3 minutes before replying simply, I'll be there. No period, no emoji. But my heart beat clearly with each pulse. The dinner was at the old house in West Hartford, where I'd grown up feeling like the extra person in my own home. When I walked in, my father was already seated, Harper helping my mother with plates. They turned to look at me, a brief silence, not uncomfortable, but like everyone was adjusting their breath. No one hugged me, no one cheered. But my mother stepped forward, saying softly, You're here. I made your favorite. It wasn't exactly my favorite, but I knew that her remembering any dish I'd enjoyed was a significant effort. I sat at the table. 6 people. No one extra, no one missing. Everything neatly arranged. Not lavish, not Whitmore style, but full and clean. During dinner, no one mentioned the wedding, or the night I was soaked in the fountain. No one asked who Daniel was, or what I really did at the FBI. Instead, my father asked, Is your workplace near a park? I understood. That question was his way of saying, I'm trying to start over. I replied, It's close. The leaves are nice this season. Everything was simple, tentative. But unlike before, no one tried to steal the spotlight. No one dropped veiled jabs. The second dinner was 2 weeks later. Harper arrived 10 minutes late, but brought a homemade apple pie. She set it on the table, saying quietly, Not too sweet, you like this kind, right? I nodded, unsure if from agreement or emotion. After dinner, as my mother washed dishes, I stood beside her drying plates. Her hands trembled slightly. I didn't ask why. She whispered, Are you tired of always having to be so strong? I paused, looking at her. For the first time, I saw weariness in her eyes, not just of age, but of quiet regret. I was very tired, I said, but now I'm learning to choose what makes me lighter. The third dinner, I brought Daniel. My father shook his hand, still a bit stiff, but without the cold grip of authority. Just a handshake between two men trying to understand each other's worlds. After the main course, Harper called me to the garden. The old bench where we used to play with dolls was still there, paint peeling. She sat, smoothed her dress, and said, without looking at me, I was jealous of you. I almost laughed. You were the one praised all the time, Harper, but you stood on your own, she said. I always felt if I lost that adoration, I'd have nothing. You could live without approval. I always felt smaller than you, but got to stand higher. I stayed silent. That confession wasn't easy. For Harper, the perfect sister role was part of her identity. Thank you for being honest, I said softly. We all have our own journeys, and you're starting a good one. She lightly squeezed my hand. No hug, no tears, but enough. The dinners that followed weren't always smooth. Sometimes my mother said something that made me swallow hard. Sometimes my father said, stay away from the press, they exaggerate. But then he'd add, but if you need anything from me, just say. I set some ground rules. No comparisons. No revisiting old hurts to wound. No using silence as a weapon. They agreed. Sometimes reluctantly, sometimes sincerely. But they agreed. I still remember when Harper first mentioned the family therapy she and Bradford attended. She said, no one teaches you how to be siblings after growing up in competition. But I want to try learning. Sometimes I wonder if all this would have happened without that awful night at the wedding. Maybe not. But I also know sometimes you have to go through the ugliest moments to see the light you need to keep. I don't expect a perfect family. I just need a family that listens when I say I'm your daughter, your sister, a person. And that, at the 8th dinner, finally happened. My father raised his glass and said simply, thank you, Claire, for not abandoning us when we abandoned you. No applause, no tears. Just me smiling saying thank you for saying that. If you've ever sat at a table feeling like a guest in your own family, tell me. I know that feeling. And trust me, it can change. As I left that night, Daniel asked, you okay? I nodded. Not perfect, but real. And for me, that's enough. I don't know what my family's future holds, but I know one thing: it won't be decided by silence anymore. Because the next chapter isn't just about me. It's when old truths are exposed publicly, and everyone must face them. A year after the fountain night and those cold stares, I stood in my kitchen in our suburban Boston home, looking through the large glass window at the garden strung with lights. Soft yellow bulbs wove through lavender trees, illuminating a long table covered in white linen where groups chatted lively. Daniel stood with my father and Harper near the fence where we'd set tapas plates and a large sangria pitcher. My mother was smiling lightly with Emma, the cousin who sent me a kind text that soaked wedding night. Mason and Kayla, my close FBI colleagues who saw me through Quantico, without ever mentioning family, were there too. A small dinner, but far from ordinary. I'd cooked red wine beef stew myself, a recipe from my grandmother, the only relative who hugged me when I failed 8th grade math. She's long gone, but her kindness lingered in how I chose ingredients seasoned carefully, and served the best portion to the quietest guest. I stepped outside, setting down a tray of garlic bread, just as Harper laughed loudly at something my father said. I looked at my sister. No, my younger sister, for a long time. Harper had changed. No longer sharply made up, no longer speaking in a CNN interview tone. She was learning to be imperfect and more likable for it. This party had no speeches, no popping champagne or formulaic toasts, but each shoulder touch, each small question like, you doing okay, showed we're trying. And sometimes that's enough. I remembered a year ago the exposed wounds, the unspoken shames. I thought I'd cut ties, completely build a new life without looking back. But maybe true growth is returning not to seek approval, but to face what once hurt, and say I'm different now. I circled the table, pouring wine, asking Emma about her new job, chatting with my mother about the lavender garden I'd planted. She said, it smells like the old cushions from when you were in high school. I smiled. Sometimes love is in the scraps of memory people hold, even if no one asked them to. After dessert, Harper started clearing plates. I moved to help, but my mother touched my shoulder. Let her do it. You're the host today. I returned to the kitchen. The familiar kitchen I once thought would only be for Daniel and me. Now it was the heart of something new. Something unnamed, undefined, but full. Standing there looking out, I saw them people who made me cry, made me feel spare, but now sat together laughing, asking, listening. I don't think family is blood. I had blood relatives and was still pushed into a fountain. I had kin who never asked if I was hurt. But now, I had people blood, and not who chose to stay, and that changed everything. Daniel stepped into the kitchen, arm around my waist. You okay? I nodded, looking up at him. Today I understood something. What family is the people who see you clearly and still choose to stay? I don't know if you've had that moment, a small one, when you look around and realize you don't have to perform anymore. Don't have to fight to be seen. Just being there is enough. If you've had that moment or are waiting for it, tell me. Because maybe that path is already starting and you just haven't noticed. I don't have a perfect ending for this story. Only one thing I know for sure. I'm still Claire Whitmore, but for the first time that name doesn't make me feel alone. My story isn't just about a girl overcoming her family's neglect. It's a journey of rediscovering herself amidst old wounds. I learned that sometimes you don't need to be understood right away, just brave enough to live as yourself, and the rest will slowly shift. This story carries simple human values. Forgiveness doesn't need to be loud. Self-respect doesn't mean isolation, and family sometimes isn't where you're born, but where you choose to reconnect. If you've ever felt lost among your own kin, I hope my journey gives you a bit of faith that change is real, even if it comes slowly. Thank you for staying with me to the final chapter. Leave a comment if something in this story touched you. Don't forget to follow for more healing journeys, because maybe one of them will be yours.